Hello everybody. I'm going to show you a solution to the vote results object problem. All I've done is I've copied the tester from my assignment into an actual tester class. Let me just remind us what we're trying to do. So we have a vote results object that's intended to tally votes for a number of candidates. The candidates are numbered from 0 to 2 because there's 3 total candidates. So you can run the cast vote method to cast a vote for a particular candidate. So here we're casting a vote for candidate 0, here for 1. This shouldn't do anything because there is no candidate 10. And then another vote for candidate 0. You can ask for the total number of votes cast for a given candidate. And if you ask for a candidate that doesn't exist, the total number of votes should be 0. And then at the end, you can ask for who the winner is, and it should return the number of the candidate who won. It should return -1 if there's a tie. All right, so let's start. I see vote results is the name of the object I want to create, so I'm going to create a class that's called vote results, which will define that kind of object. I'm going to drag my windows side by side so you can see a little bit better. All right, so first you should always think, what fields do you need? What variables do you need to keep track of? So here it seems like I need to keep track of how many votes have been cast for 3 different candidates. So I'm going to start making my variables private. You might not know about this yet, but that's okay. So I'll have an int for candidate 0 and candidate 1 and candidate 2. All right, for people who know about arrays, you're probably thinking, why on earth would you do this when you could just use an array? And that's where we're headed. So that's a good thought to have. But for the moment, let's just have 3 separate variables for 3 separate candidate tallies. So I'll create a constructor, vote results. I'm looking at how I'm using it, and it seems like I'm not giving my constructor any input here in my tester. So that means I shouldn't give my constructor any inputs here where I'm defining it. I do want to initialize all my variables here, however. So I'll say candidate 0 is initialized to 0, and the same thing for 1 and 2. Primitive data types, like int, these are actually going to get initialized to 0 by default, but it's never bad to initialize them explicitly. All right, so let's make the cast vote method. Cast vote. It seems like my method needs an input because I need to know who is being voted for. And the input looks like it's a single integer. So int num. Okay, so I'm going to do some checking to make sure that this input number isn't out of bounds. It's not for a candidate that doesn't exist. So I'll say if the number is less than 0 or the number is greater than 2, then I know the candidate doesn't exist. So I'll just return immediately. You might not have been aware that you can do this. If the return type is void, you're not going to have a return value, but you can still return, and that will just exit from your method immediately. All right, so I'll say if num equals 0, then we want to cast a vote for candidate 0. So I'll say candidate 0. You could say candidate 0 plus 1. A shorter way of saying the same thing would be candidate 0 plus plus, which just adds 1 to the candidate 0 variable. So I want to do that 2 more times. If the number equals 1, then I'll tally a vote for candidate 1. If the number is 2, I'll tally a vote for candidate 2. Once you rewrite this using an array, we'll be able to do all of this in like 1 line of code. It'll be a lot faster. All right, so that takes care of casting votes. Let's do get total votes. So public. So this one's supposed to be, here I'm asking for an answer back. I'm saying how many votes did candidate 0 get? And I'm expecting an answer that's an integer. I'm expecting it to tell me they got like 3 votes. So that means my return data type here needs to be int, because that's the type of information I'm expecting to get back as an answer from the method. So get total votes for, and then it also needs an int as an input for who the candidate is. So here I'll just, again, need a bunch of if statements. So if number equals 0, then I want to return how many votes did candidate 0 get. So I'll return candidate 0. And then I'll do that 2 more times for candidate 1 and for candidate 2. And then otherwise I'll return 0, because if the input wasn't candidate 0, 1, or 2, that's a number that doesn't exist for our candidates, so they would have gotten 0 votes. All right, finally, get winner. So again, get winner is supposed to return an integer because it's going to return what number candidate got the most votes. So you could do this, as usual, in a couple of ways. We could have several if statements. So if candidate 0 is greater than candidate 1, and also candidate 0 is greater than candidate 2. So this is just a way of saying if candidate 1 is larger than the other 2, then they must be the winner, so we'll return 0, because I'm not trying to return, I almost typed candidate 0, but that's how many votes they got. It's not the winner. So actually I want to just return 0 because that's the number of the candidate who won. So you could do this. We'd have 2 more if statements for the other 2 candidates. So there we go. Oh, I didn't change my return values. So there we go. I've got if candidate 0 is larger than the other 2, then I'll return 0. If candidate 1 is larger than 0 and candidate 1 is larger than candidate 2, that means candidate 1 got the most votes, so I'll return 1. And then the same thing for candidate 2. If none of these 3 if statements are true, then that means there wasn't a single candidate whose number of votes was larger than the other 2, so I should return -1 because there was no clear winner. Okay, so as I was saying before, arrays are actually going to make all of these methods much smaller. But for the moment, this is a class that should work. Whenever you're writing your own classes, you should always test them in some way. How to write a good set of tests is a kind of a larger topic, but you should at least run the methods to see, are we doing something sensible? So you noticed I just ran it and then nothing happened, seemingly. And the reason nothing happened is because I didn't print anything here. So let's print these things. So system.out.println candidate 0 got, and then I'll print total 0 for total votes for candidate 0, and then out.println winner is, and then candidate. All right, so now I can run it again. Candidate 0 got 2 votes, winner is 0 because, yep, candidate 0 got 2 votes. So let's try this. Let's change this to 1 and run it again to make sure it displays what we're expecting. Great, so now candidate 0 got 1 vote, and the winner is candidate 1, because it looks like candidate 1 got 2 votes here. Great, so that seems like it's working.